I was born into what appeared to be a normal middle-class household in a peaceful suburban neighborhood. My name is Tiffany Mitchell. The Mitchells, my parents, David and Sarah, were totally preoccupied with theories and practices related to early childhood education and child development. Stacks of parenting books filled our home, and Mom couldn't stop babbling about the latest theory she'd read. "I don't think we're going overboard, Sarah." While my mother was having trouble teaching me basic mathematics, I recall my dad asking one night. I had just turned 3. Mom firmly asserted, "No, David, these are crucial developmental years," as she presented David with another vibrant flashcard. "We need to start early. The books advise." In retrospect, I find it hilarious that, despite their best attempts, my development was so mundane. On time I got up, walked, and spoke, not quite a prodigy. My parents, however, failed to see that each child grows and develops at their own rate, and instead saw me as an experiment gone wrong. The birth of my sister, Jessica, altered my life in every way. At the age of 3, my family's home seemed to become a veritable baby genius summer camp. In her resoluteness to avoid repeating the errors she believed she had committed with me, Mom had even enrolled in specialized classes by that point. Their approaches to raising Jessica couldn't have been more different. Jessica possessed instructional growth tools in contrast to my ordinary playthings. Jessica possessed cognitive enhancement resources in contrast to my picture books. There was a party for every new achievement. She was able to walk ahead of her classmates, articulate her thoughts at a young age, and complete puzzles designed for older children. Peter and Eleanor Mitchell, my grandparents, resided nearby, and their house became a haven for me. They showered equal amounts of affection and care on Jessica and myself. Sitting on Grandma Eleanor's lap while she read stories to Jessica and me was a memorable Sunday afternoon when I was around 5 years old. While presenting us with cookies, Grandma would remark, "Both of my granddaughters are perfect just the way they are." For some reason, this never failed to annoy Mom, who would then squirm and mutter something about recognizing great ability. "Children need love, not pressure," Grandma might have assertively stated during a family meal to Sarah. "These are not meant to be scientific tests." "Mom, you really fail to grasp the concept of contemporary parenting." Dad defended Mom. "There is genuine potential in Jessica. We must encourage that." While I pushed the peas around my plate, I knew deep down that my parents saw me as nothing more than a dress rehearsal for their eventual masterpiece. I had a fairly typical experience in elementary school. I wasn't the best student in my class, but I also wasn't the worst. Being a typical kid was fun. I made friends, completed my assignments, and had a good time overall. I was content with the B's and A's that appeared on my report cards. In contrast, my parents gave them a cursory look. The next day, Jessica began her academic career. However, my sister received totally different treatment than I did when we were both enrolled in our local public school. "We've enrolled Jessica in the Wellington Academy for Gifted Children," Mom announced proudly at dinner one evening. They rarely accept children so young, but they were very impressed with her test scores. I remember choking on my milk. Wellington was that fancy private school across town, the one with the huge campus and Olympic-sized swimming pool. The tuition there cost more than a car. The spending didn't stop there. Every time Jessica complained about the workload or threw a tantrum about homework, our parents' solution was to throw money at the problem. "I don't want to do math today," Jessica would whine. "It's too hard." "Tell you what, sweetie," Mom would say, "if you finish your homework, we can go to the toy store and get that new dollhouse you wanted." It didn't take long for Jessica to figure out this game. Soon, every minor accomplishment came with a price tag. "If I get an A on this test, can I get the new iPad? Or I'll do extra credit if you buy me those designer shoes." Meanwhile, I sat at our kitchen table doing my homework alone. No rewards, no special attention. Once I got the highest score in my class on a science project, a solar system model I spent weeks building. When I showed it to Mom, she just nodded and said, "That's nice, honey. Oh, did you hear Jessica got accepted into the advanced mathematics program?" The final straw came when I was 13. I had just finished decorating my room, the bigger of the two kids' bedrooms, with posters of my favorite bands and some photos of me with friends. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was my space, my sanctuary. One evening, Jessica marched into the living room where our parents were watching TV. "I want Tiffany's room," she demanded, hands on her hips. "Mine is too small for all my things, and I need more space for my study area." I looked up from my book, certain our parents would shut down this ridiculous request. Instead, Mom and Dad exchanged glances. "You know, that makes sense," Dad said. "Jessica does have a lot more equipment and educational materials." "What? No," I protested. "That's my room. I've had it since I was little." But my objections fell on deaf ears. The very next day, while I was at school, they moved all my things into Jessica's smaller room. When I came home, I found Jessica already settled in my old room, her expensive desk taking up the space where my bed used to be. "This is so unfair," I shouted, tears streaming down my face. "Life isn't fair, Tiffany," Mom said dismissively. "Your sister needs the space more than you do. Don't be selfish." I slammed the door to my new, smaller room and collapsed onto the bed that barely fit in the space. That night, as I stared at the unfamiliar ceiling, I realized something important. In this house, I would always come second. High school graduation was approaching, and I'd spent months researching colleges, writing applications, and dreaming about my future. I had decent grades and some good extracurricular activities on my resume. While I wasn't aiming for Harvard or Yale, I had my sights set on several solid state universities with strong business programs. That fateful family dinner started like any other. Grandma and Grandpa had come over for Mom's Sunday roast, and we were all seated around the dining room table. Jessica was bragging about her latest academic achievement, while Mom and Dad beamed at her with pride. "So, Tiffany," Grandma Eleanor turned to me with genuine interest. "Tell us about your college plans. Where are you thinking of applying?" Straightened up in my chair, excited to finally share my plans. "Well, I've been looking at State University's business program. There." "Oh, about that." Mom cut me off mid-sentence, setting down her fork with a sharp clink against the plate. "We've been meaning to discuss this with you, Tiffany. Your father and I have decided we won't be able to help with your college tuition. We need to save all our resources for Jessica's education. She's got a real shot at the Ivy League, and that's not going to be cheap." "You can't be serious." Grandpa Peter's fork clattered onto his plate. "What about Tiffany's future?" Mom sighed as if she were explaining something obvious to a small child. "Look, we have to be realistic here. Jessica is gifted. She has real potential. Tiffany is ordinary. She can get a job right out of high school," Mom continued, "or maybe take some community college classes if she saves up." "How dare you?" Grandma's voice shook with anger. "How can you dismiss your own daughter like this?" "Oh, please," Dad snapped, his face reddening. "Let's not pretend here. Tiffany's never shown any exceptional abilities. Higher education would be wasted on her. We're just being practical." I couldn't take it anymore. The walls felt like they were closing in. Shoving my chair back, I ran from the table, tears already streaming down my face. Behind me, I could hear the continued argument, my parents' so-called logic clashing with my grandparents' outrage. A gentle knock came at my door about 15 minutes later. "Tiffany, can I come in, sweetheart?" It was Grandma Eleanor. I didn't answer, but she came in anyway, sitting on the edge of my bed. Her warm hands started rubbing circles on my back, just like she used to do when I was little. "Your grandfather and I have made a decision," she said softly. "We're going to pay for your college education. All of it." I rolled over, wiping my eyes. "What? But that's too much money." "Nonsense," she smiled, reaching out to brush my hair from my tear-stained face. "You deserve an education just as much as anyone else. More, actually, because you've worked hard for it without any support." For the first time that evening, I felt myself smile. In that moment, something shifted inside me. I realized I didn't need my parents' approval anymore. I had people who believed in me, and more importantly, I was starting to believe in myself. College life suited me perfectly. Away from my parents' constant comparisons and criticism, I flourished in the business program. My professors praised my analytical thinking, and I discovered I had a natural talent for understanding market trends and investment strategies. Every weekend, I'd call Grandma and Grandpa to update them on my progress. I hadn't spoken to my parents since leaving for college, and they hadn't tried to contact me either, which honestly made things easier. The only updates I got about them came through my grandparents, and one particular call changed everything. "You won't believe what's happening with Jessica," Grandma said one evening, her voice heavy with concern. "She's completely gone off the rails. You know she got into Princeton. Your parents wouldn't stop talking about it, but apparently, once she got there, away from your parents' constant supervision, she just stopped caring about school altogether." I listened as Grandma painted a picture of my perfect sister's dramatic fall from grace. Jessica, it seemed, had discovered parties, boys, and the freedom to do whatever she wanted. Her carefully cultivated image as the family genius crumbled in a matter of weeks. "Your mother called me in tears yesterday," Grandma continued. "The dean's office sent them a warning letter. Jessica's barely attending classes, and when she does show up, she's either late or hungover. What are Mom and Dad doing about it?" "Oh, they're beside themselves. They've tried everything, threatening to cut off her allowance, promising her a new car if she brings her grades up, even flying out to Princeton to talk some sense into her. But Jessica just laughs it off." The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of giving Jessica everything she wanted, my parents had created someone who didn't know how to handle responsibility. A month later, Grandma called with an update. "Well, it finally happened," she said. "Jessica got kicked out of Princeton, failed almost every class, and had too many disciplinary infractions to count." I could hardly believe it. The golden child, the genius, the one who was supposed to bring glory to the family name, kicked out of college after just 1 year. "She's moved back home," Grandma added. "Your parents aren't in shock. They keep saying there must be some mistake, that the university didn't understand Jessica's special needs as a gifted student." Over the next few months, through my regular calls with my grandparents, I learned that Jessica had settled into a comfortable routine of doing absolutely nothing. She slept until noon, went out with different guys every night, and treated our parents' house like a hotel. "Your father tried to get her to at least look for a job," Grandpa told me during one call. She told him that work was beneath someone of her intelligence level. I felt vindicated and pleased, and at the same time, I felt relieved that I'd escaped their suffocating expectations and found my own path. After graduation, I landed a position as a junior investment analyst at Meridian Financial, one of the most respected firms in my hometown. Grandma and Grandpa insisted I stay with them until I got settled, and I gratefully accepted. The unexpected reunion with my parents happened on a Saturday morning at Marshall's grocery. I was comparing prices on organic tomatoes when I heard my mother's voice. "Tiffany, is that really you?" I turned to find both my parents standing there, looking older than I remembered. Mom was clutching her shopping cart like a lifeline. "We've missed you so much," Dad said, his voice unusually gentle. "Why don't you come over for dinner sometime?" Part of me wanted to decline, to remind them of how they dismissed me years ago, but curiosity won out. "Sure," I heard myself say. The dinner was surreal. The same house, the same dining room table, but everything felt different. My parents couldn't stop praising my job at Meridian. Investment analyst at such a prestigious firm, Mom kept saying, "We're so proud of you, honey. James Wilson told me they only hire the best and brightest at Meridian." I could see Jessica's knuckles turning white around her fork. She had just quit another retail job, her third that year. Over the next few years, I worked my way up at Meridian. Each promotion came with new responsibilities and challenges, which I tackled head-on. My parents started inviting me to regular family dinners, and I accepted occasionally, maintaining a careful distance while allowing them back into my life. Jessica continued her pattern of short-lived jobs and longer periods of unemployment, never leaving our parents' house. She'd work as a waitress for a few months, then quit because it was beneath her. She'd try reception work, then leave because it was too boring. Everything changed again at one of our family gatherings. Jessica burst through the front door, dragging along a tall, well-dressed man in his 30s. "Everyone, this is Charles," she announced triumphantly, "my boyfriend." Charles was polite and well-spoken, clearly from money. Jessica spent the entire evening shooting smug looks my way. "See," she finally said during dinner, her voice drooping with satisfaction. "I bet you didn't expect me to find someone before you did, Miss Career Woman." I just shrugged and took another bite of Mom's pot roast. Jessica's attempt to get under my skin felt childish, especially given everything I'd achieved. My parents, however, were completely smitten with Charles. They hung on his every word about his family's real estate empire and his private school education. When he left that evening, promising to take Jessica to some fancy restaurant, the following weekend, Mom pulled me aside. "Isn't it wonderful?" she whispered excitedly. "Charles comes from such a good family. They own half the commercial properties downtown. Jessica's finally found her path to success." I didn't bother pointing out that dating a rich man wasn't exactly a career achievement. Some things never changed. My big break at Meridian Financial came when I spotted a critical error in one of our major investment portfolios. The senior analysts had overlooked a pattern of high-risk investments that could have cost our clients millions. I stayed up 3 nights straight, analyzing data and preparing a comprehensive report. "Miss Mitchell, this is remarkable," Mr. Davidson, our CEO, said during the emergency meeting I had called. "How did you catch this?" I noticed inconsistencies in the risk assessment models. I explained, walking them through my findings. If we redistribute these investments now, we can not only avoid losses but potentially increase returns by 12%. My strategy worked better than anyone expected. Within 6 months, the restructured portfolio showed a 15% increase in returns. Clients were thrilled, and Meridian's reputation soared. I followed this success by developing a new investment algorithm that helped identify emerging market opportunities for our competitors. Then came the day that changed everything. I was called into the boardroom, expecting another routine meeting. "Tiffany," Mr. Davidson began, "we're creating a new position of investment director, and we want you to fill it." I nearly dropped my coffee cup. Investment director. That would put me in charge of all investment strategies for the firm. It was a massive promotion, skipping several traditional career steps. The first people I called were Grandma and Grandpa. They were beside themselves with happiness and pride. I shared the news with my parents at our next family dinner. To my surprise, they seemed genuinely excited. "This calls for a celebration," Mom declared. "You must have a party." "I was thinking of reserving a private room at Limon," I said, referring to an upscale restaurant downtown. "I could invite the whole family." "Oh, no," Mom interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "You should have it here. Your father and I will help organize everything. It will be much more personal, more special. I'll invite all the relatives and order catering from that wonderful place on Oak Street." Her enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself agreeing. Over the next week, I transferred money to my mother's account for the party expenses, and she kept me updated with regular phone calls. The evening started with such promise. I arrived at my parents' house wearing my favorite black cocktail dress and pearl necklace, a graduation gift from my grandparents. The house was beautifully decorated with fresh flowers on every surface and elegant place settings at the dining table. The caterers had outdone themselves, and the aroma of gourmet food filled the air. Family members were already there, mingling in small groups. My grandparents gave me warm hugs. Aunt Susan kissed my cheek. Uncle Robert patted my shoulder. Jessica was holding court in the living room, wearing a stunning blue designer dress with Charles by her side in an expensive suit. Once all the guests had arrived, we gathered around the large dining table. I stood up, champagne glass in hand, ready to make my announcement. "I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight," I began. "Oh, sweetie, let me." Mom jumped up, cutting me off mid-sentence. Her voice was almost singing with excitement, but not for the reason I expected. "We've gathered here today," she announced, beaming at the assembled family members, "to celebrate a wonderful occasion. Our beautiful Jessica and her wonderful Charles are engaged to be married." The room erupted in gasps and congratulations. Jessica pretended to blush while showing off a massive diamond ring I hadn't noticed before. Charles smiled proudly beside her. I fell back into my chair, my champagne glass nearly slipping from my numb fingers. This couldn't be happening. The party I had paid for, my promotion celebration, had been hijacked for Jessica's engagement announcement. Looking around the table in disbelief, I saw nothing but genuine happiness on everyone's faces. Even my grandparents were smiling and congratulating the happy couple. That's when it hit me. None of them knew this was supposed to be my celebration. My parents had invited them to an engagement party, not a promotion party. My chair scraped against the floor as I stood up, anger burning in my throat. But before I could say anything, I felt my father's iron grip on my wrist. He pulled me close, his smile never wavering for the benefit of the guests, but his whispered words were ice cold. "Don't you dare make a scene," he hissed through clenched teeth. "If you ruin this for your sister, we'll cut you off completely. No inheritance, no family, nothing. Sit down and smile." I yanked my hand away from my father's grip. "No," I said, my voice cutting through the cheerful chatter. "Everyone needs to know the truth." The room fell silent. Jessica's smug smile froze on her face. "This party," I continued, my voice growing stronger, "was supposed to be celebrating my promotion to investment director at Meridian Financial. I paid for everything. The food, the decorations, all of it. My parents took my money and turned my celebration into an engagement party for Jessica without telling me." Gasps and whispers filled the room. Aunt Susan's hand flew to her mouth in shock. "That's not true." Mom tried to interrupt, her face flushing red. "Tiffany, stop this nonsense right now." "Show them the invitation, Aunt Susan," I said calmly. "What does it say?" Aunt Susan fumbled in her purse and pulled out the cream-colored card. It says, "Join us in celebrating the engagement of Jessica Mitchell and Charles Aldridge." Charles stood up slowly, his face darkening. "You told me this was a family dinner where you'd announce our engagement," he said, looking at Jessica. "You never said anything about stealing your sister's celebration." "Charlie, baby, let me explain," Jessica started, but he cut her off. "No, I've seen enough." He turned to me. "I'm sorry, Tiffany. I had no idea." Then he looked back at Jessica. "This engagement is off. I won't be part of a family that treats people this way." "Look what you've done." Jessica shrieked at me as Charles walked out. "You've ruined everything. You're just jealous because I found someone and you're still alone." "Jealous?" I laughed incredulously. "I'm the investment director of a major financial firm. I don't need to steal someone else's party or trap a rich man into marriage to feel successful." "That's enough," Dad roared, standing up. "You've gone too far, Tiffany. You're no longer part of this family. Consider yourself disinherited." "Fine by me," I said, But before I could continue, Grandpa's voice boomed across the table. "Actually, David," he said, standing up with Grandma, "your inheritance won't matter much. Eleanor and I have already changed our will. Everything we have is going to Tiffany." "What?" Mom gasped. "The only person in this family with any integrity is her," Grandma said with a stern voice. "You've shown your preference for Jessica over Tiffany for years, and we've seen it. Enough is enough." After that, the night turned into an absolute disaster. Family members started to flee in a state of embarrassment. My parents stood there in stunned silence as Jessica fled upstairs, sobbing. I confidently gathered my belongings and made my way to the door, my head held high. Saying goodbye, I turned away from the mirror. "Don't contact me again." 13 months have passed since then. Since that night, I have avoided communicating with my parents and Jessica. Word on the street has it that Jessica has not left her hometown as she is still resentful of Charles and his fortune. On 1 or 2 occasions, my parents attempted to contact me, but I had already blocked their numbers. But my grandparents are still my pillars. On Sundays, we all sit down to eat, and they are far prouder of my accomplishments than my parents were. Looking back, I see that night as the most fortunate thing that could have occurred to me. It liberated me from the burden of seeking validation from individuals who would never genuinely offer it. Just last week, Meridian Financial made me their youngest chief executive officer. Grandpa cracked open a bottle of champagne he'd been hoarding for an important day, and Grandma sobbed joyful tears as I told them. "To authenticity," said he, "and to finding your own path." Smiling, I lifted my glass to the sky. It had finally happened. I had arrived at my destiny.